and welcome to 100% Real with the anti-wankness. I did it again. The anti-wellness wankery episode number, I don't even know anymore, but Tom and Ruby are here again today. It is like my happy hour of the week. It's my favorite little hour with Tom. Fucking love it, and I know you guys love it too, so let me know your thoughts as usual at the end of the podcast. But today, as we mentioned on the last series together, we are talking about metabolic adaptation, and a lot of people feel as though X amount of calories, let's say 1300 to 1500, becomes their maintenance at the end of the fat loss diet, which is not true. And a lot of people feel like their metabolism is getting, like, they screwed up their metabolism from the years of dieting, or their dieting has slowed their metabolism, all these other things. And then we're also led to believe that our metabolism is doomed to like shrink into this tiny little spectrum while we're dieting. And that's not the case. And I also wanted to talk about the mindset behind this, because it's kind of like what you predict is going to happen in a fat loss phase is going to happen in a fat loss phase. Just like I mentioned in the last podcast episode series, where if you focus on fat loss and it's almost like I'm starting a deficit, I'm going to expect to be hungry, I'm going to expect to not have energy, I'm going to expect these things because now I'm on lower calories, or even just the mindset that you're on deficit calories now can lead you to spiral, number one. Can lead you to have to cut your fat loss phase short before you get any tangible results, or have to cut it short because then you just start sabotaging yourself if you're in the right mindset and don't keep trying to grit it through. But it can lead to a lot of bad consequences if you think yourself there, because placebo is a real thing. Like, you're not going to get that hungry or feel the effects straight away just because you started a diet. But you can believe it so just because it's in your mind. It's almost like when I was doing more targeted meal plans for a couple of my girls way back, and then I changed up their meal ingredients and it was like 250 calories less to 300 calories less. They didn't even notice because it wasn't in their mind, hey, I just got my calories reduced. So the way that we think about our approach is going to dictate our experiences with that, as well as our outcomes with that. But to the point, metabolic adaptation. A lot of people come to believe this to be true, but in this research paper, it has been shown to not actually be a case of, hey, our basal metabolic rate is decreasing to X degree. The only degree that is going to decrease is as your body mass decreases, because there is less of you moving around. And most of it comes from the fact that your steps, your general movement is going to be less. But then if you place on top of that, okay, I'm tracking my steps now, I'm moving along, I'm keeping my activity exact same. You could be doing that as well, but it's like, what are you doing outside of your planned activity? There is a difference between NEAT, non-exercise adaptive thermogenesis, and NEPA, which is non-exercise physical activity, which is where you count in your steps. You count in your planned movement outside of the gym in the NEPA. The NEAT is more like you're fidgeting, you're blinking, all that stuff. That is where your metabolism does slow down slightly. That's the stuff you're not in control of. But that is very minimal, meaning you have this within your control to make sure that you are increasing the things that are within your control, that you're tracking that stuff, that you're on top of that stuff. So Tom, have you seen this play out in any situation within your clients or in general?
Oh yeah, I mean, it happens all the time. Like the average person, I would say, who has been dieting for a long time or has struggled to diet for a long time will have some degree of a variety of issues, which tends to get bundled into this idea of metabolic adaptation. I believe that the reason a lot of people talk about metabolic adaptation, they might talk about metabolic damage, or they might talk about how their metabolism is adapted. Like, this is a really common misconception that, like I hear this from I hear this from a lot of people. If I go on low calories, then your body just gets used to that number of calories and that becomes your maintenance now. So don't put your calories too low. Like, this idea is really prevalent even outside of people who are really involved in like the fitness space. And it's just not really true. So this whole thing goes back to this one paper from like the 40s called the Minnesota Starvation Experiment. So what was happening obviously in the World War is we had a bunch of people who were placed in concentration camps, and the Allied forces needed to know what to do with these people when they were released. So there was a bunch of conscientious objectors to the war in the US. They wanted to help the war effort, but they didn't want to be in active combat, and they volunteered to be a part of this experiment where they essentially mimicked concentration camp conditions. So you were on like 50% of your maintenance calories, and you were doing forced labor every day. I think they had them like digging holes or moving bags of rocks around or something. And over a period of however long the study was, they lost like a shitload of weight. They lost like 40% of their weight or something like that. It might have been 25%. And the researchers then did a bunch of stuff to measure a bunch of things. And I know this study come from like the 40s, but it was that well done that it's still something that you could reference today. It's still kind of like the gold standard of how this kind of research is done. And what was found was that because these people were lighter, their body, of course, expended fewer calories per day. If you don't believe me, put on a 10-kilo backpack, walk around with it, report back with how tired you are. If you're lighter, you're easier to move around, you burn fewer calories. And so that meant that their maintenance calories did reduce a bit, but there was a little bit more of a reduction than would be expected. So if you want to conceptualize this, you can take like two people who are 70 kilos. They could be identical twins. Both of them are 70 kilos. One of them's always been 70 kilos. One of them used to be 100 kilos, and you drop down to 70 kilos. Although now they are the same age, height, sex, have the same activity level, etc. The one who's lost weight down to that 70 kilos, he'll burn slightly fewer calories than will the 70 kilo person, and that's slightly fewer. That's metabolic adaptation. So that's what we're talking about here. And the Minnesota starvation trial found that people had about 14% adaptation. So their calories reduced a bit because they were lighter, and then there was about 14% more reduction, which works out as like a couple hundred calories a day. This has then been followed up by a ton of research, including there was a really interesting trial where people were trying to mimic what it would be like to live in like a biosphere on a different planet. So like, can people live in an entirely self-contained ecosystem? These people ended up in a calorie deficit because the answer to that at the time was no. And they found that they had about 7% metabolic adaptation once you accounted for the weight that was lost. It's typically found in basically every piece of research that is done on fat loss that looks for it, in somewhere between 50 to 80% of participants. So not everyone is going to experience adaptation, but a lot of people will. Now, the important thing here, and there are two important pieces of nuance. First of all, three important pieces of nuance. Not everyone experiences it. And it doesn't seem entirely clear why that's the case. The next thing is, intuitively, the faster you lose fat, the more adaptation you're going to get. That doesn't seem to be true. In fact, as much as I wouldn't like it to be the case, last time I looked at all of this, which was a couple of years ago, but I did like a big research review for a blog I was writing at the time. If you underwent bariatric surgery, so you had like a stomach bypass or something like that, you experienced less adaptation than if you just dieted. And I don't want it to be that way, but that was the case. And the final thing is that on average, outside of the Minnesota starvation trial, and I'm assuming nobody's dieting like that, where you're moving rocks around on 50% of maintenance, there was that study, found 14%. The Biggest Loser, where they essentially starve people and force them on treadmills for 8 hours a day and shout at them. The Biggest Loser, they found about 18% adaptation. Outside of that, it tends to be in the region of about 5 to 7%. So if you work out what your basal metabolic rate is, it'll probably be somewhere in the region of about 1,800 to 2,000 calories for the average person. Maybe a little bit lower if you're a smaller woman, a little bit larger if you're, a smaller person, a little bit larger if you're a larger person. But it'll be about that 1,800 mark. So if you do 5%, 1,800, it's 90 calories a day. Okay, and that's just your basal metabolic rate. So your maintenance is probably in the 2,000 range, and you're now, if you've dieted down, it'll be at about 1,900. So the important thing to remember here is that this is something that happens, and so it's something that I think is useful to be aware of. But 90 calories a day ain't shit.
60.
And it's about 60. Like, that's not going to have the kind of effect that people experience. So if you're struggling to lose fat, if you have been dieting for a long time, if you yo-yo dieted for a long time, even if you have experienced this kind of adaptation, it's not the reason why you're struggling to lose fat. And I think that's the main takeaway that people need to take from all of this bollocks. Like, even if you have experienced adaptation, and you possibly have, the reason that you're struggling to lose fat on the calories that you are isn't that. It's usually something else. So, Ruby, in your experience, what is that something else?
I do want to touch on it is like about that 60 calorie mark, because with the research that I've looked into, they've even researched physique competitors that have got down to stage lean levels. And even in those extreme cases, getting down to that extreme level of leanness, which is extremely unhealthy, their metabolic adaptation was still around the 40 to 60 mark amount. It is minuscule. Yes, and that's the thing. Like,
the papers that I've looked at, it's about 5 to 15, so about 50 to 180 at top end. So it's probably, it'll be between like 30 and 100, let's say, for the average person who's not doing Biggest Loser style dieting.
Exactly. So it is not going to be metabolic adaptation that is doing this exact thing. And you alluded to this at the very start of your spiel, in that a lot of people have tried all these different diets, and before they come to us, they would have a freaking receipt full of things that they've tried in the past. And along with that comes limiting beliefs, comes mindsets, comes identities that need to be changed, where your only metric of progress is the scale. You don't see success as anything else except restriction or doing something really freaking hard because that feels productive. And it's that very mindset that leads to this weight loss resistance. You are fighting yourself. Taylor Swift song, it's me, I'm the problem, it's me. Like, that is the thing there. And with the mental fatigue, the diet fatigue that comes with that, it's why maintenance, it's why there's such thing as a primer phase that people call it these days, or the pre-diet phase. That is the best place to put you into, even if you have 20 kilos to lose, even if you're 30% body fat. That primer phase is not saying that you're not going to lose fat. And there's this stupid belief that if you're not losing fat, you're gaining fat. If you're not focusing on fat loss, you're gaining fat. If you're not in a deficit, you're gaining fat. It's this black and white mentality. Where's the middle? Just because the scale goes up, it doesn't mean it's fat. Just because the scale goes down, it doesn't mean it's fat. Metabolic adaptation is very much due to our behaviors, our mindset, because your relationship with food dictates how your physiology responds to that meal. If you are fearing that food, you're going to have a shitload of gastric distress. You might be thinking your own food intolerances into your body because you're stressed out. You're not going to be digesting very well. That leaky gut that people talk about is a permeable gut lining. It's not leaky gut. It's the fact that you're so stressed out, your body is unable to actually break down the food and extract it so you can use the nutrients, that it can actually go through there's like these cells in the intestinal tract. It can seep through there, and that's foreign to the body. What happens after that? An intolerance, inflammation, that is such thing as well. And with that, if you're then freaking out about the fact, hey, I'm getting so much belly fat, I'm getting bloated, I feel fat, and then you cut your calories reactively, put yourself back into a diet reactively, and then things total around, you might overeat, go back into this binge restrict cycle. What is going to happen from there? You're not in a place to be building muscle. You're not in a place to be losing fat. You're in a place where you're just spinning your wheels, working really hard. You feel you're doing something productive. You feel you're moving somewhere, but you're just in this reaction chain, not this proactive chain where you're moving forward. And with every single little nuance of this, binge restrict, you're just getting more body fat. You're not losing anything. Even if you're in a deficit for a few weeks, you're not losing anything, because what happens outside of that? And you're not doing anything conducive to be putting on muscle tissue, to be training really hard, because there's no structure, there's no intention. So that's one element of it. But then there's the element where it's just like, okay, so you're not doing the reactive dieting thing there, but what exactly is your mindset towards the diet itself? Because like I already mentioned that. And if you're doing a lot of cardio, a lot of training, there's going to be, okay, how is this impacting your life at home? Are you slopping around on the couch? Are you not walking to go get what you usually go out to walk to get? Is there anything else that you want to touch on for metabolic adaptation? I don't know if you can hear my dog crying in the background.
Yeah, bless her. Yeah, so whenever I work with someone who is under the impression that the reason that they're not losing fat is because their body has somehow adapted to a lower calorie intake, invariably it's one of three things that's holding them back. So first of all, and the big one, it's intermittent non-adherence. Most of the time I find when people aren't sticking to their diet, they stick to it like 95% of the time. And they'll have one day every week, or they'll have an hour or so every day where they're no longer sticking to their diet. And a big part of this is, in the second kind of issue, it's they save calories for late in the day, or they save calories for a weekend while dieting, with the idea of like, oh, if I eat less during the day, I can have a big meal at night, or if I eat less during the week, I can have a big meal on a weekend. And while that's technically true, if you can still maintain your total calorie intake, people tend to overshoot that. So if you're saving a bunch of calories during the day and then you eat something on the night, oftentimes that is not going to satisfy you because you're not eating a satisfying number of calories anyway, because you're dieting. And so what happens is you save all these calories during the day, meaning you're really hungry during the day, and then when you get to finally eat on the evening, you are still on dieting calories, so you're still not eating up to maintenance, so you're still really hungry, so you have extra snacks. Or it's even worse if you diet really hard for the whole week and then try to relax a bit on the weekend, you end up overeating on the weekend. That is enough to put you at maintenance. Or to link it into the third point here, even if it isn't, it's going to slow fat loss down. And most people who come to fat loss have unrealistic expectations to begin with. I see all the time on social media, or look at this person who's lost 3 pounds this week or lost 8 pounds this week. And don't get me wrong, that happens. Most people who lose fat are going to lose it in the region of about half a pound a week on average. It can go faster, but it usually doesn't. And so what that tends to mean is that if you're intermittently not adhering and you're saving calories and then bumping up a little bit further towards maintenance, you're going to be losing a quarter of a pound a week, which is imperceptible. And when you factor in the daily fluctuations that happen with your body weight anyway, monthly fluctuations, if you've got a menstrual cycle, it can feel as if you're making no progress. And so people get sick and they start to diet harder and then they binge and it just doesn't work. And so what I tend to find with people who are struggling with fat loss, who say, oh, my body has adapted, what they tend to do is they tend to say, right, this isn't working, so I'm going to do more. I'm going to do more cardio. I'm going to diet even harder. I'm going to try even harder. I'm going to rest less. And the problem is that is massively counterintuitive. Whenever I hear people say, I'll do anything to lose fat, the first question I ask is, will you be willing to do less? And the answer is usually no, or at least an implied no. And generally speaking, honestly, like if you're struggling with fat loss, if you're trying everything and you're trying and you're pushing and you're grinding and it's not working, chill out. What you're doing is not working, and you don't need to do more of what's not working. You need to do something else. Usually it means being a bit kinder to yourself. So yeah, that's broadly my experience of people who believe they've experienced metabolic adaptation. Because yeah, as I've said, even if you have experienced some amount of metabolic adaptation, that's not the reason you're being held back. And even if we think of this logically, if metabolic adaptation was the problem, dieting harder is not going to be the solution, is it? So even if you are right, which you're not, you're still approaching it the wrong way.
You can't force a faulty system harder because it's still going to jam up. It's literally still going to jam up. And that's exactly what I thought. I know I've spoken about this on podcasts before, but honestly, that's the thing that I thought. I'm just like, no, I'll just try this again. I'll just try it a different way. I'll just try a different version of it. The system was still faulty. And it comes from a fear of, I trusted the coach and I trusted his ways because he was coaching one of my really close friends, and her and I were exactly the same situation. It worked for her. She was eating all the carbs in the world. I was envious of how much she could eat and how good she was looking and how much she was progressing. But yeah, it's like, why are you so fearful of making this change? For me, it was I didn't trust my body, but what's the alternative? To keep staying stuck in the same thing that you've been doing for years, or to try something different? Because your version of comfort is not comfortable. And back onto the metabolic adaptation side of things as well, it's like this kind of behavior, you're probably not even sleeping properly. And if you're lacking quality sleep, you're not going to be building muscle and recovering properly. You're not going to be performing well. Your food tracking and ability to stay the course is going to be completely dysregulated. Your blood sugar is going to be dysregulated. So you're going to have more cravings. You're going to have weird appetite cues. You're probably going to snack on things without even realizing. And most people don't even track accurately to start with. So there is that to consider in there as well. And yes, will you do less?
Just on that point, so one of my favorite papers ever, which, and I mean, it wasn't in a huge group. Okay, we're talking about like a study on 36 people, so this is not definitive, but I think this illustrates something that I believe to be true. It suits my biases, so I'm going to report it anyway. But there was a study on 36 people, and what they did is they put all these people in a calorie deficit, but the half of them were faced with 1 hour less sleep a week. So 1 hour less sleep per night for the week. So you're in a calorie deficit and you've got reduced sleep versus people who were just in a calorie deficit. And the people who were in a calorie deficit and reduced sleep lost, I think it was like twice as much muscle. So yeah, like if your idea of dieting is like, right, well, I'm going to sacrifice sleep, I'm going to get up earlier, I'm going to eat less, I'm going to train harder, it's like you're probably not going to get the results you want.
It's not even that. It's as soon as you're like, when you're deeper into a diet, your sleep quality is like, you might feel like you're knocked out. It's kind of like alcohol. It's kind of like you thinking that your caffeine at 3 p.m. is not affecting you. Your sleep quality is still going to get affected. Whether you feel it or not, you're not going to have high quality sleep. Caffeine doesn't affect me that way. Oh no, bloody well shit it does. You just can't tell. Your sleep is getting impacted. Sleep, not sleep, coffee, alcohol. The other one is just dieting. If you're cutting carbs, and if carbs are something you're taking out of your life, then be prepared to adapt even harder, because you will adapt harder, because carbs are for the thyroid, number one, and carbs are for tryptophan, carbs are for sleep. Carbs help you with the serotonin, tryptophan, melatonin process. So it's going to help you sleep. But so many people fuck off carbs the second that they feel like they're getting fat or they need to diet or whatever it is. And even just being on low calories is going to impact your sleep quality, regardless of whether you feel it or not. And you'll even realize that sometimes you'll wake up through the night a little bit more as well. Usually you wake up more through the night due to stress, because your liver depletes itself of glucose, which is why sometimes I'm like, have some honey before you sleep. But then if you're someone who has a terrible relationship with food and it's just like, oh, that's a waste of calories, good luck sleeping, because I've had to deal with some people like that too, and it was not great. But as soon as they finally took in that honey, it did actually help their sleep quality, but you can't mitigate that factor. And if you're feeling like you're getting fluffy and gaining fat in your deficit, it's more likely the inflammation from the sleep that you are lacking. And then if it keeps on going, then that is why as well. So I think the best way to kind of add,
I think that's a really good point. I think that's really interesting. Whenever people are looking to lose fat, right, one thing that happens is necessarily your carb intake is going to go down a little bit. Even if you're not cutting carbs, necessarily that's going to happen. So what can often happen when people lose fat is in the first few weeks, they are in a calorie deficit. They're losing a little bit of fat, but what you notice is a loss of glycogen. And so it makes your muscles look smaller. And so in the first few weeks of a diet, people often look way worse. And that can massively throw people off if they've got a somewhat negative relationship with food. And you have to just run out this fluffy phase until you start to see the diet working. But I see it all the time. Like, people have been dieting for 2 weeks and they're like, oh, I've lost so much muscle. Like, I look so much worse. It's like, you haven't. Chill out. Like, you'll be fine. You just need to ride that out.
Yeah, that is actually a really good point, because you could feel fluffy just from that because you're not full anymore. And I realized I actually had this happen to me yesterday. I felt like my belly was just floppy and flippy. And you know that my belly isn't floppy or flippy, but it's because the day before I ate out. And when I ate out, I minimized my carbs around that, just because of the fact that I know I'm eating out. And because I had less carbs that day and I had less carbs before I slept, I woke up looking more watery, looking like I've gained a bunch of fat. I didn't. I actually even forgot to weigh myself that day because I don't really care about the scale. So I I only remember maybe like every now and then, and it's only because my coach wants that. But otherwise, I don't give a shit about the scale. But I felt like I gained fat. I looked like I gained fat. I knew realistically I didn't, because my calories were in line. If anything, they were actually lower than what I targeted. But it's like, that will be okay-ish because I ate out and I don't know how much oil or sugar was in that sauce, because that chicken teriyaki sauce was absolutely disgustingly gross. It was so sweet. But it's like, I needed my protein, bro, because there was no other protein on the fucking plate. But anyway, that aside, there was no other dressing because I didn't get dressing on the salad. Regardless, it's like, that is something that can impact how your body looks. Simply where your carbs are manipulated. And it's why when my coach, you already know this, that when I started with my coach for 2018, he took me from 160 carbs all the way up to 250. He wanted me on 300, but I refused. So I met him closer to where he wanted me and way further from where I was, 160 to 250. In about 2 weeks, after freaking out every single day at the scale because he wanted a daily weigh-in, and me freaking out to him every single day, he compared my photos. I think it was actually 4 weeks apart. And he's like, you look harder. Your midsections come in. You can see that you actually have some ab definition now. Can you see what carbs you were lacking before? Now your muscles have soaked them in. Now your body is functioning properly. And I bet you feel better for it too. But this is why I get you guys to focus on feelings. Because I actually don't even know how I felt. I was too focused on how shit I felt within how fat I felt. Stop focusing on the stuff that you are trying to move away from and start focusing on what empowers you. Because it was after getting that riveted into my head after a couple of months that I started to realize that I feel amazing. I'm training amazing. And then I started asking my coach for more food, and he kept telling me to settle pedal. Not yet. We're doing this the right way. And here I am wanting more food. Like, who asks for that after never wanting more food? That is a mindset. That is like a fueled, empowered mentality that is going to get you to where you want to be. And knowing that your coach has your best interests in heart and isn't going to just feed you up like a porky pig and give you more food when you want more food. It's like that kind of thing. But I think a great way to end this podcast, we were going to talk about another study, but we'll probably bring in more nutritional bullock shit in the next episode and talk about just how terrible for your health a low carb, high fat diet can be. Yes, a low carb, high fat diet can be extremely terrible for your health. Approach this specific way in particular, but some strategies can be, as we've already mentioned at the very start, tracking your steps, being aware of your sleep quality, not focusing on fat loss, not focusing on outcomes, not focusing on your body changing, not focusing on what you're going to get out of it. Just keep doing what you're doing. The only thing that's changed is that your calories are in a deficit. Nothing else has changed. And I would also say, I'm going to go on a really, really, I wish my phone was recording, but I hate the message that, there is going to be some nuances to this because I know you have a slightly different stance and I agree with you as well. But when you actually are dieting hard, your food choices need to change. I hate the stance that your food choices shouldn't change when you start to diet. Yeah, they should, because if you're eating mostly calorie-dense foods, you're going to be starving by the end of the night. Like, yeah, you don't want to be eating ridiculous big bowls of food and getting yourself used to freaking rabbit food 24/7, because that's not going to do very well either. You do want some calorie-dense, well, not really calorie-dense, nutrient-dense stuff in there as well. Like, you want to find that sweet balance, that sweet spot. But yes, your food choices should change in that diet to allow you to stay satisfied, because hunger is probably the biggest cause of people falling off. So make your food choices smart. Eat more veggies. And I would actually say that your food choices should change in a diet for the majority of people, because most people do not eat enough veggies as it is. Like, if you're vegetarian, you probably eat enough veggies, I would hope, but so many people don't. So make sure that you are eating enough plants. Make sure you are eating your lean protein sources. And because your fat intake isn't going to be that high, make sure it is coming from high quality sources, aka not animal products. Make sure it's coming from things like olives, like avocados, omega-3s, seeds, nuts, stuff like that. Even though seeds and nuts, do be careful, because you can easily, do not measure your seeds and nuts and fat sources with cups and tablespoons and shit like that. grams, because have you ever tried to compare a tablespoon of peanut butter with like what is reality? Anyway, so there's some strategies there. And log your training, how it feels, the weights. You want to make sure that you are still training with the idea of progression. You won't always progress. You might go backwards in some things because you're not as well fueled, but the goal is to try to at least maintain where you're at, because you should still be able to maintain and progress on some things. Some other things maybe not, because axial loading, fatigue, the fact that it's compound moves, it depends on how your mentality is around that. Like with me, I get impacted straight away mentally with the diet.
Yeah.
Any strategies from you?
Yeah, and on that last one, like, it sort of depends on where you're starting from, but yeah, you're not going to progress as quickly in your strength training. Yeah, you're not going to progress as quickly in your strength training when you're dieting, and there will be a point during the diet when you have to just be like, look, I'm going to try and maintain as much strength as I can. I'm not expecting to hit any PBs. And at that point, if anything, training gets easier because you get to reduce volume significantly. I think the only thing I would add to what you said there is to, in the least like fluffy way possible, like, be kind to yourself when dieting. I think it's far too easy for people to forget that be kind to yourself isn't just some like bullshit phrase that you see in like wellness posts on Instagram. Like, it's actually important. Fat loss is not about punishing yourself. It's not about being as hard on yourself as you can and treating yourself like a Victorian naughty child who needs to be beaten and then put in the corner. Instead, fat loss is simply about, exactly as you said, maintaining basically your entire lifestyle, apart from eating slightly fewer calories and maybe doing a little bit more activity. And that's all it needs to be. And it should come from a place of kindness. It should come from a place of love, and it should come from a place of, I am doing this for myself because it will make me feel better, rather than I'm doing this to myself because I need to feel as bad as possible, because that'll mean that I can change as fast as possible, because I need to change because right now where I am and who I am isn't good enough. And I have never, ever in my entire coaching career found a single person who can do well on that I'm going to punish myself lean mindset. I'm not saying it's never happened. I'm just saying I've never seen it. And I've seen an awful lot of people find fat loss to be one of the easiest things in the world when it comes from a place of, I'm going to do something for myself because it will make me feel better. It always works better. And if you're not doing that, you're making yourself miserable and not getting progress at the same time, which to me sounds a bit counterintuitive.
That is probably the most important part. I can't believe I missed that. And it is probably, it's not hunger. It's that. Exactly what Tom said. That is the thing that sabotages most people. It's like tied in with that is impatience, unrealistic expectations. But most of all, it's comparing. If you've done a crazy diet before, it's comparing your now progress to what you've tried before, because changes probably happened really fast on your keto diet. Changes probably happened really fast on the last 12-week friggin' challenge you've done. But none of that lasted. None of that was enjoyable. You only remember your memories as fake things, because memories are not real. You just remember them in some fabricated construct of your mind of what you believe was true about that based on where you are now and how uncomfortable you are now. And I would say most people don't even know how they want their lives to look, how they want to feel, what their actual goals are, because they're too focused on what they don't want, moving away from where they are now. They've never truly sat with themselves to get clear on what their life, how they want their life to look like, how they want to feel, what they can see themselves doing in 3-5 years from now, which is really far in the future, yes. But everything you do in the now is accumulating to what's going to happen in 3 years and the 5 years. And it's not like, poof, you just become this supermodel in 3 years. That is happening over time. But without knowing exactly what you want, you cannot make those consistent actions forward, because you're going to stay stuck sabotaging yourself. If you're so focused on what you don't want, what energy do you think is expanding? That toxic energy. And toxic energy kind of just, that's off in another planet. It's like in the black hole. That nothing grows from a toxic environment. Try planting a seed in toxic soil or infertile soil, because that's where you are now. So get yourself out of there and start planning yourself in your future garden. And in the future garden, you're not going to see the oak tree for a few years, but you still got to show up. You still got to pluck out the weeds. You still got to do the daily work. You'll probably see some small flowers blossoming around the garden that you've planted around, but that oak tree, the one that you really want, that one's going to take a while. So why not focus on creating some beautiful things in that garden in the meantime? Orchids, violets. Enjoy the experience of making your garden while your oak tree grows. But you still got to do the work. And you can't just focus on growing things. You still need to do the work to get rid of that old shit that is never going to stop coming through. The roots of those weeds, regardless of what you do, they're still going to come through. So make sure that you're pruning them out. Make sure you're keeping that mindset clean. Just like you shower yourself every day, you need to clear your mind every single day. It's normal to clear your body, but that mind needs clearing too. And that's my bow. Would you like to bow that up?
No, that'll do for me. I think that's all.
And I think this is probably, I swear our podcasts just keep getting better. And I hope you stuck through the sticky little start to get to this little magic. And we will see you on the next podcast. We will talk about low carb, high fat diets. We will talk about Zoe. We'll talk about food ordering. We'll talk about weight. We've already spoken about this, but it's still a thing. Fucking cortisol, fucking insulin. Like, no, insulin is great. Cortisol, you would die without it. So take from that what you will. And if you want to know more, come back and listen to the other one. Bye.